All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to try and chart a course through the, let's face it, pretty turbulent waters of the digital world. We're going to break down the whole strategic process of risk management, basically how organizations navigate all those digital dangers to stay safe and, actually get stuff done. So let's get started. Right out of the gate, we slam into this fundamental challenge that every single company faces. You could call it the risk management paradox. I mean, if you lock everything down so tight that it's a fortress, nobody can do their job. But if you swing the doors wide open, you're practically begging for trouble. And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you protect what's important without bringing your entire operation to a grinding halt? Figuring that out is pretty much the entire reason we're talking about this today.
Which brings us perfectly to our first section, the balancing act. And look, this isn't just some catchy phrase. It is the absolute core goal of any good risk management strategy. It's about helping the business move forward, not just stopping bad things from happening.
So what are we really talking about when we say risk management? Well, officially, it's this systematic process. But notice the really important words here. It's a process, not a one-time thing. And it has two jobs: protect the assets, but also enable the business goals. It's defense and offense all at once. Let's make this super clear. Just think about your bank. They want you to have super easy 24/7 access to your money online, right? That's a business goal. But they also have to be absolutely sure that no one else can touch it. That's the security side. Every single day, they are walking that tightrope, and risk management is the pole that keeps them balanced. Okay, so if we're going to navigate this tricky balancing act, we're going to need some tools. And it helps to think of risk management as giving you two essential things for this journey: a compass and a map. First, let's talk about the compass. You see, risk management isn't some project you finish and then, check it off the list. It's not going to happen. The world of threats is constantly changing. So this process acts like your compass. It keeps you pointed in the right direction and lets you adjust your course when a new storm pops up on the horizon. And what about the map? Well, the good news is we're not just wandering around in the wilderness. There are these proven guides, frameworks like ISO 27005, which is the big international standard, and NIST 800-37, which is used all over the place, especially by the US government. They give you a structured path to follow so you're not just making it up as you go. So, with our compass in one hand and our map in the other, it is time to get to the active part of this journey, sizing up the dangers that are actually out there. The heart of this is what's called a risk assessment, and you can really break it down into three pretty simple steps. First, you identify the risks. You spot all the potential icebergs out there. Then you analyze them. You figure out just how big and scary they are. And finally, you evaluate them, which is just deciding which icebergs you need to steer away from right now. So, how do we analyze a risk? Well, it really just boils down to two fundamental questions. First, likelihood. What are the actual chances that this bad thing is going to happen? And second, impact. If it does happen, how bad is it going to be? How much damage are we talking about? And this is where those two things come together in a really useful tool called a risk matrix. It's simple. You just plot each risk based on how likely it is and how big its impact would be. That lands it in a colored box. Green means, we can probably live with it. Yellow means, okay, we need a plan. And red means all hands on deck now. Now, that final step, evaluation, is absolutely key. This is where you take that color-coded risk and you hold it up against your organization's unique risk appetite. That's just a fancy way of saying how much risk the company is willing to stomach. This is the moment that turns a technical exercise into a real business decision. Okay, so we've spotted the dangers, we've put them in order. Now for the most important part. What in the world are we going to do about them? It's time to make the right move. You've basically got 4 strategic plays in your playbook. You can try to reduce the risk, by installing firewalls or other controls. You can avoid it completely by just deciding not to do the risky thing. You can transfer it, which is what you're doing when you buy insurance. Or if it's a small risk, you can just formally accept it and decide to live with the potential consequences. But hey, remember that compass we talked about? The journey is never really over. Once you've made your moves, you've got to stand guard. And that brings us to the last and maybe most important phase, the never-ending watch. The reality is, the digital seas are always changing. New threats are popping up every single day, and the fancy security control you put in place yesterday might be totally useless tomorrow. That's why you have to be constantly monitoring. You've got to keep an eye on things, making sure your defenses are still working, and always scanning the horizon for what's next. So, what's the end game here? Well, all of that hard work, the matrices, the controls, the monitoring, it all has to get boiled down into something simple and clear for the people in charge. The goal is to take all that complexity and roll it up into a high-level picture, like a dashboard that lets them make fast, smart decisions. And that's really the ultimate purpose. You're not just managing technical problems. You're giving business leaders the intel they need to make strategic choices that can mean the difference between falling behind and leaping ahead. You're basically giving them the visibility they need to steer the whole ship. You know, if you take only one thing away today, let it be this. The goal here is not to create some fantasy world with zero risk. That's impossible. The real goal is to understand your risks so well that you can manage them intelligently, making conscious, smart choices about which ones are worth taking and which ones you need to fight. Because in the end, if you're sailing on these digital seas, you are going to hit storms. There's no way to avoid all of them. So the question this whole process really leaves us with is a bit more personal. Are you and is your organization actually prepared to navigate them when they hit?